Senator Fasano.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I don't think there's any question that I'm rising to not support the budget. But I do want to talk, before I do and get into the details of the budget, I do want to briefly say about the process that we just had. I said it then, I'll say it now. The governor showed great leadership in bringing everyone together. And in the room, the governor did a very good job of bringing people together and forcing the issue on both sides, forcing Republicans to cough up more, if you would, and Democrats to cough up more, if you would. And I appreciate that, because that's what we need to do more in this building. 97% of the bills we pass by bipartisan agreement. When we get to this budget, there's this wall that goes up, and we don't get around it. I appreciated the conversations that we had. And I think Republican leadership that talked about a RIP, listened to those who said RIP is not a great idea. Here's why. We withdrew the RIP. We had some disagreement on the unitary tax because I argued with the governor that we believe the unitary tax was wrong because the combined reporting unitary tax would include way too much stuff. And the governor made a very reasonable, logical argument as to why you need the unitary combined reporting. And we backed off from that position. That's what conversations do. That's what conversations do. Just because we didn't reach a deal doesn't mean the process failed. It worked. Now, I don't agree with the budget, as my colleagues don't as well. But that doesn't mean this process was a failure. I thought it was a very good process for the reasons I so stated. I would suggest to this body and to those downstairs in the House and to the governor's office, this is the way we should do things. We've done bills that have been controversial in both chambers, like same-sex marriage, civil unions, gun bills, jobs bills, deficit mitigation. We've done that as a group. Only when the conversation happens, and even in these rooms, it's cathartic to get things off your chest, and everybody did that as well. That helps. So that's the good part. The part that wasn't so good is, I would suggest if we had that meeting in February and in March, we wouldn't be here today. Because people get into corners. Our negotiating tactic was clear. When we were brought into that room, we said we're not going in that room saying, let's disregard the entire budget put through by the majority party, signed by this governor, and start anew. We walked in there and said, let's take what we have and see what we can do with what was passed, and see how we can work together, keeping the principles that the majority party passed, because we respect the fact that you're a majority party. So we worked within those rules. What we said was, we need structural changes that roll out to the future. That's what we need. We suggested voting on contracts. It was argued the reason why you want to vote on contracts is because you don't like unions. Malarkey, garbage, ridiculous, not even a thought process. We could have conversations. If you believe in the ability to pay, then why within our system the person who's making $38,000 has the same copay as a person in our system making $150,000? Why don't we make a little fairness there? Maybe a single mom in our system making $38,000 should pay $3 in a copay, and someone making $150,000 should pay more in a copay. We don't get that right, because it is negotiated at a level for which we don't participate. But then we have to have the courage to stand there and say we accept it or we don't accept it. We're responsible. We're fiduciaries for the state. And what do? We let the contract sit on the calendar. We don't vote on it. They go back to the districts and people say, you know this, you know that. Say, hey, don't blame me. I didn't vote on it. Where's the courage? We should be involved. I will bet you better contracts on all sides come out as a result of these discussions, because it's not held at this esoteric top level of political government. It's to all of us who represent many union employees in all of our districts. Those are the conversations we should be having. That's why I think we should vote on the contracts. That's why we talked about it. But when we're told that is a non-starter, that does put a wet blanket on the ability to have conversations. The second part that was brought up was the fact that pensions for 2022 would not be part of a contract for CBAC. Why is that important? It's important because we are the only state in New England, including New York, that has pensions as part of that contract negotiation. We're one of only 3 states, I believe, in the country that has pensions that are protected in that way. Because when you put the pensions in the CBAC agreement, you give it constitutional protection. In 2011, this body voted out a bill that said we need to change the pensions. 2011. This body voted in favor of it. It said we're not going to put in sick days. We're not going to put in overtime. We're going to exclude some other items. And this body said we need to do it now because 2017, at that time, the CBAC agreement was going to be renegotiated. So we approved it in this body by, I think, I voted against it for different reasons, but we approved it in this body so that there was 5 years in which state employees could negotiate and understand what's going on and have opportunity to move. Many of the folks in this chamber spoke that this was the right thing to do. It was a structural change we need to do for the future. So we stuck it in our proposal. For some reason, it's not good now. From 2011 to 2017, it was okay. From 2016 to 2022, which is the new contract, it's not okay. I don't understand the difference. I thought we were all going to try to work to do structural changes. So when we look at it, and we look at the constitutional spending cap, the first one we did put out had a tougher language in it. It said, we're going to do a constitutional spending cap, that's what we promised the people, and if we don't do it, no bill will have final action after March 1st, until we pass a constitutional spending cap. And there was great pushback on that. And you know what? I can understand that. So our draft said, we don't get paid. If we don't have the responsibility to do what we promised the citizens of this state, that we were told by the AG we failed, then we shouldn't get paid. And we shouldn't get any mailing privileges until we do what's right. That was rejected on a vote just previous. So the changes that we put forth were structural changes. Out of the $350 million close for 2016, $214 million are cuts. I agree with, I guess Senator Looney's going to say, is that the Republicans agreed to most of those cuts. Not all those cuts, but most of those cuts. I agree with that. In trying to reach a deal, yes, I agree with that. We believe $30 million to hospital cut is huge. So we didn't agree to that number. We were at 0. Mind you, in this budget that you have in front of you, you're talking about a $30 million cut to hospital, but there's $4 million that Governor Malloy can cut to Medicaid any place he wants to cut. So if he wants to cut hospitals another 4, he can do that. Know that when you vote. If he wants to not pay a Medicaid bill, lower doctor's fee from A to A minus 10%, he can do that without any of us agreeing. That's how we balance this budget. $214 million of cuts, and then we did another 100 and some odd million of one-time revenue sweeps. We got $550 million deficit in 2017. Where are we going to go with that? 2 largest tax increase in history. And it's not due to the stock market. Has absolutely nothing to do with the stock market. By the way, I didn't say that. OFA said that. It has everything to do with the depression in wages and the lack of good paying jobs, which speaks to the health of the economy in this state. And until we address that, until we have sustainability, until we have predictability, words the governor's used, we are not going to get ahead in the state. Look at the governor's call that all got served on us by the state police. It said, we are having session for structural changes to the future. Where are they? I don't see them. Now, it will be argued that some of our suggestions were taken. To argue that a concept that we put out there with details is then taken into the budget as a title, but the details have been extremely watered down, is disingenuous to suggest you accepted our changes. For example, on the spending cap, we had equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats. I think we just suggested that those conversations were good. We asked to have a report on February 1st. We had public hearings no later than February 15th and a vote on March 1 with the penalty I suggested. In the budget you're voting on, 15 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Does anybody really care what we think? Really? Let's be honest. Does anybody really care what the minority party thinks? No. Not at 15 to, or 12 to 5. I said 15, I apologize. 12 to 5. Then their first meeting is no later than 60 days after the effective date, but the commission is not required to give proposed definitions until December 1st, 2016. Gee, about a month after the election. About a month after the election. Where's the courage? Where's the promises? No guarantee of approval yet. We're still not at voting. We just got an answer a year from now. We want to develop a plan for Southbury Training School with the stakeholders, the families. I don't know how many of you got to visit it. I have not. I know a few people around this chamber, in this circle, have relatives who are there. So we said, let's get together with the stakeholders to figure out what's the best course of conduct. Their proposal is the OPM secretary and DDS commissioner shall submit a report. No input from the stakeholders. Is that really all that unreasonable to have the stakeholders in the room? I thought we were about transparency. Overtime commission for overtime expenditures. Equal number of R's and D's, beginning on 2/1 to start looking at agencies and report to OFA. We have a whole procedure. The report that we got back, or what's being proposed, is OFA quarterly shall report on the overtime. And March 16th of 2016, March 16th of 2017, the OPM secretary report on efforts that they have made. That's not being proactive. Our overtime's $220 million. Now look, for prisons and police and for public safety issues, yes, overtime is going to be needed. But we need to change the contracts that require overtime. I'm sorry. I think if someone is late for work an hour, the person who has to stay should not get 4 hours of overtime. That's really a little bit outside the norm. 4 hours of overtime because somebody's 1 hour late for work? Doesn't make any sense. It adds to our structural deficiencies. So the bottom line is, I like the process. But there are no structural changes that tell residents of this state, businesses of this state, we are moving in a different direction. All this says is the status quo is the status quo. We took $7 million from 2017 and moved it into 16, which tells me, by the way, that there was absolutely no more money to find in 16 if you're going to make 17 even worse of a deficit. How's that long-term planning? How do people have predictability in what they're doing? Nobody knows how we're going to solve this. Clearly, we don't. Madam President, I just think it's the wrong track. I think in the conversations we had in that room, Madam President, there was a lot of common ground. I would argue a lot of common ground on structural changes. I would even argue a lot of common ground on structural changes for contracts and the way we do business in the state. But if we don't have these conversations starting January 3rd, I know session starts February, if we don't start these conversations on January 3rd, if we're going to wait to April or May when we're all tied up with 1,000 things and then we're running around here making decisions without a thought process, we're endangering this state and the people in it. And that's not fair. When that budget passed and we were critical, we were called names, me in particular. I got thick skin. I don't really care. But we were right. We said it was the wrong direction. But when you start calling companies names and you start calling them out, disrespecting them, I got a problem with it as a representative of this state. And now we're scrambling to apologize by way of a bill that fixes the business bad budgeting we did 4 months ago. So I know it's going to pass. It's probably going to pass the House. But I caution that we got a lot more work to do, and we better have a lot more conversations. Madam President, thank you, and thank you for your participation. I also want to say to Senator Looney and Senator Duff, thank you very much for the conversations that we have. I thought they were very good, so thank you so much. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Fasano. Senator